Thank you. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Joseph, are you at least 18?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Joseph, do you believe in a God?
Yes, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ.
Sure. What would be your best evidence or your best argument for why the Christian God is real?
Well, I think he's real because, well, first of all, we're in 2024 after Jesus Christ, so that shows that he did exist.
So what is the evidence that your God is real? You can't say that like he's real because you exist. Thank you, Bethers.
Okay. Well, I also think that the Bible is there for a reason.
Okay, so the Bible is the evidence that your God is real.
Yes, that's part of the evidence.
Great. So what about the Bible proves your God to be real?
Well, the Bible is written over 1,500 years, and
800 years.
I don't see any. I think it's actually 1,500 years.
Joseph, I'm really sorry. I heard your answer, but it was an answer that I've heard so many times that my brain already blocked it out. What were you saying?
Okay. I was saying that the Bible was written over 1,500 years. I haven't seen a book that was written
What's the
over
oldest manuscript?
1,500 years.
In fact, Joseph, I already know that you and I have had this conversation. I recognize your profile picture. And I recognize the argument that I'm about to use against you. So I'm just going to do the whole thing over again. So when was the oldest manuscript of the Bible written?
I'm not so sure, but I think...
What's the oldest documentation that we have?
I think it should be the Red Sea Scrolls.
Not even close. You're thinking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you would be wrong. The scrolls that you're looking for are the Ketef Hinnom scrolls. They are typically referred to as amulets. Brunette, thank you so much for the resubscription, by the way. And one of them looks a lot like this. It's written in Paleo Hebrew script, and this dates, this little guy here, this dates to the 6th century BCE. Moses, this is from the book of Numbers, by the way. This is a quotation from the book of Numbers. So the people who lived during the time period that the book of Numbers is recording was about 800 years prior. So there was 800 years between the desert wandering and these scrolls. Shai, thank you for the subby. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Shai, for the subby. Jinx.
You owe me a Dr. Pepper.
You know what? Fine. But it's not going to be zero sugar. You're going to be a man and have the actual sugar one.
You can keep your sugar.
I drink.
You can keep that devil juice.
No! It's so delicious. Okay, sorry. Continue, Joseph.
Oh, it was him speaking, actually.
Okay, so the oldest manuscript we have dates to the 6th century, which is 800 years after the events that they're recording. So I wouldn't find those to be trustworthy witnesses. And if it's true that even, let's imagine they were written earlier. Let's say they were written during the reign of Solomon, which they weren't. But even if they were, that still only puts you 1,000 years before Jesus. So at best, we've got a collection of texts that were written over a series of about 1,000 years, and that's not special. On my bookshelf behind me, I've got all kinds of texts that contain Babylonian and Akkadian literature that were written over a time period of 1,000, in fact, 2,000 years. So what about a collection of texts being written over time makes it special?
But your texts are not from God, are they?
My texts claim to be part of God's corpus. So here in this book, I've got over 2,500 years of ancient Near Eastern literature. So I want to know the evidence that your special book is from God.
Yeah, because...
You're nefarious for the subby.
Okay, so what it contains is actually true, and we've seen it unfold through
also,
history.
Like what?
like Jesus coming, being born.
Okay, so the Bible
from a
predicts.
virgin.
So the Bible predicts Jesus. Yeah.
You
So
did not.
where in the Bible is Jesus predicted?
That should be Isaiah 14. If I'm not mistaken, it's Isaiah 7 verse 14.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to read it. Do you know what's happening in Isaiah 7?
Yeah. It's talking about. I think it's talking about the city of Jerusalem is going to be attacked and destroyed at some point in the future.
It's happening currently. It says, in the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and King Pekah of Remaliah of Israel went up to attack Jerusalem, but could not conquer it. So King Rezin, the leader of the Arameans, has an alliance with the leader of the northern Israelites, and they attack Jerusalem, which is led by King Ahaz. And King Ahaz, of course, is terrified that his kingdom is going to fall, which is why it says in verse 2, when the house of David heard that Aram had allied itself with Ephraim, the heart of Ahaz shook, and the heart of his people shook, as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. Okay, so that's the setting. Then God sends the prophet Israel to go give him a word of encouragement by the fuller's field, which is where they wash the clothes. And then he sends him a second time. The second time, he says, again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying, ask a sign of the Lord your God, and let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. Then Isaiah said, hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary mortals, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child, and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted. So this prophecy is from Isaiah, and who is it to?
So thank you, Calypso, for the subscription and sending out the subscription. And thank you, Denise, for the $6.66 on Venmo. Yes, praise Zeus, win electricity.
Yeah, thank you, Calypso. And we got Cyber in the chat. Yeah, Cyber, I'm always torn as to whether or not this is supposed to be about Hezekiah or whether or not this is about the son that is born to the prophet and the prophetess in chapter 8. My particular view is that it's more likely to be the son, but we can get into that at another time. But Hezekiah, of course, is a very fair interpretation. It could be about Hezekiah because chapter 9 is undoubtedly about Hezekiah. Chapter 9 is absolutely about Hezekiah. All right, so Joseph, who is this prophecy to?
So this prophecy is to the children of Israel, Judah.
Wrong.
To say that
who did the prophecy say it was to?
The Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying,
Thank you, Anna. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's speaking. It's speaking. It's speaking to Ahaz, and by extension, the household of Ahaz. And God is going to give Ahaz a sign, according to the prophecy, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that sign is that there is a young woman who's already pregnant, and she's about to give birth, right?
No, I don't think she's already pregnant.
It says, look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son. Mm-hmm. That's the present tense. She's already pregnant. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's about a woman who's already pregnant. In fact, the prophet is telling King Ahaz to look, behold, whoever this young woman is somebody who the prophet knows, because the prophet and Ahaz would both know it. In fact, it could have been a member of his household.
Okay, let's just say that you're right. So how is this a sign then?
Easy, because look at what he says about the child. He says, before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose 2 kings you are in dread will be deserted. So the child is a sign to King Ahaz that before this child is old enough to know right from wrong, God is going to deal with these 2 kings that are attacking you. And then he tells you how he's going to do it. He's going to bring the king of Assyria down. And then in chapter 8, that's what happens. In chapter 8, as the king of Assyria is coming down to fulfill the prophecy, the prophet himself cries out with a loud voice twice, O Emmanuel. Because the prophecy is not about a Messiah. It's about God being with his people in their time of trial.
So who was it then? If that's where you're going, then
Well,
you should know who it is too.
Well, actually, you don't have to. So my particular interpretation is that it's the child born in chapter 8. That being said, you don't have to know who this child is to know that the child is not the Messiah. The child is a sign to King Ahaz. The only thing that matters is that King Ahaz knows who he is. It doesn't matter if I know who he is. All right. Now it says, the Lord said to me, go ahead.
Okay, I was saying that you mentioned that chapter 9 is about Hezekiah, but
It is.
that's not true, is it?
Do you want to finish the current discussion, or do you want to go to chapter 9?
Oh, yeah. This child that's being talked about is the same child that's being talked about in chapter 9.
I disagree.
That's what how do you disagree then?
Because you have no evidence.
Because it's still talking about a child.
Because you have no evidence that would suggest that. So there are 2 children. One of them is already conceived in chapter 7, and it's about to be born. Now, we don't know when exactly chapter 7 was written, other than it had to have been written before the Assyrian invasion. So we know that much. What we don't know is when chapter 9 was written. Chapter 9 could have been written after the invasion. It could have been written before the invasion. We don't know. I'm inclined to believe that it was written before the Assyrian invasion, and that they believed it was about Hezekiah, because Hezekiah, at the time chapter 9 was written, was already born. And King Hezekiah was expected to defend the nation against any military onslaught. And King Hezekiah, actually, let's just read it. All right. Isaiah chapter 9 says, "For a child has been born for us, a son given to us." Is that future tense?
No. This is past tense.
Okay, so this is not about the future then, is it?
It is, because...
it's not. We'll try this again.
Is, actually.
Okay, what kind of words do you have to use when talking about the future?
In Bible literature, it's different from just you don't have to take it literally. It always has a deeper meaning. It's not just what you're talking about right now. Like if you say that,
I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree too, because if you go to Revelation,
if every prophecy has multiple meanings, then that means it's subjective. So if you can just apply a secondary meaning to any text, then I can make the text mean anything I want it to. So if the text doesn't mean what it actually means based on the context and the history and the narrative clues, then I'm certainly not inclined to believe that the book is from God. In fact, why would God write a prophecy in the present tense knowing that the way language works is that a prophecy about the future needs to use future tenses?
Well, if you talk to a regular Jewish person, he would really understand what this is.
In fact, we've probably got 3 of them in the chat right now. There might even be a Jewish rabbi in the chat. So, Joseph, the Jewish people agree with me that this is not a prophecy about the Messiah. It says, a child has been born for us. The Hebrew word yulad in the PL verbal stem is in the past tense. It says, a son given to us. The Hebrew word natan is in the past tense. This is not about a future person that is coming 1,000 years later. It says, authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now listen to this part, because this is where you guys stop reading. It says, great will be his authority, and there will be endless peace for the throne of David and for his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and righteousness. Did Jesus sit on the throne of King David?
Well, Jesus didn't sit on the throne of King David at that time, but he did mention that the prophets, all of the prophets were talking about him. He did mention it himself.
Well, I know what Jesus said, but that wasn't my question.
Mm-hmm.
My question, did he ever sit on the throne?
No, because
did he ever?
His time hasn't come yet.
Okay, so then he's not the fulfillment of this.
It hasn't come yet. Has he not sat on the throne of David yet?
Fantastic. Well, when he comes and sits on the throne of David, I'll be glad to say he fulfilled this prophecy. So this obviously isn't a prophecy about Jesus if he didn't fulfill it yet.
So who else is the mighty God and the Prince of Peace?
Oh,
can you tell me who that is?
That's quite easy. Yeah. So there's a couple flaws in your argument. You're assuming that the word Elohim, which is the word that's used here, always means a god, but it doesn't. It's used elsewhere in the Bible to refer to anyone that has divine authority. For example, it talks in the book of Ezekiel about Gibberim Elohim, which refers to the mighty warriors, referring to warriors of God. And also it talks about King David and Moses being Elohims. So to be an Elohim doesn't mean that you are God. It just means that you have some sort of a recognized divine status. In fact, the word Elohim in Hebrew isn't the name of God. The word Elohim is a concrete abstraction in the Semitic language that just means divinity. Just like the word virginity. The word virginity is a concrete abstraction from the word virgin. So the way you would say virginity in Hebrew would be Bethulot, which is identical to the plural of virgins. The way you would make a concrete abstraction of El would be Elohim. Actually, it would be the concrete abstraction of LA, but that's a grammatical nuance. We don't need to go there. So when we read the word Elohim, it doesn't just mean they're speaking of a specific deity. It has a wide semantic range.
Okay, so is David and all the other persons that had the title Elohim, are they the everlasting Father too?
No, they would be if they were a king, though. So if they were a king, they could be referred to the father of the people. And we see elsewhere in the Bible where kings are recognized as fathers of the people, just like Yahweh is the father of the Israelites, even though he didn't actually father them. Now, I'm going to ask you a very interesting question, Joseph, because we've already recognized that Jesus didn't sit on the throne, so he couldn't have fulfilled this prophecy. Now, you're claiming that this is about an actual God, which I don't think it is. If that were the case, then why are there multiple gods in the book of Ezekiel when it refers to the Givarim Elohim?
Okay, so I'll start with your explanation of everlasting Father.
Well,
and,
that's not an answer to my question. So,
father, but everlasting is not part of his. He's not everlasting, but Jesus is everlasting.
Oh, he's not. He's dead.
Well, what do you mean he's dead?
He's dead. So before you can say something silly like Jesus is the everlasting Father, you would have to first demonstrate that he's actually alive, and you can't do that. So let's not go to the New Testament nonsense yet. I'll gladly debunk you on the resurrection after we handle this. So the fact of the matter is, the throne of King David is forever. God said in the Old Testament many times that the throne of King David is eternal. That's why in Jeremiah 33 and elsewhere, it says that there will always be a king on the throne. Now, it just so happens that these prophecies were all wrong. They weren't right. They're not from God. If I believed that these prophecies were from God, I would be Jewish, but I'm not. So these prophecies have failed, and you're trying to say, well, they can't be about a mortal because the prophecy failed. There's nobody on the throne right now. So it must be about Jesus. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to engage in those types of somersaults because I'm an atheist and I can just look at it and admit, oh yeah, prophecy failed.
Okay. Well, if you look at it in your limited knowledge, then yes, it's failed. But if you look at it in the
limited knowledge, he says.
That yes, if you look at it in the context that this throne was going to have someone on the throne as long as they kept the covenant.
Oh,
but they didn't keep the covenant.
I'm gonna read you something. Also, thank you, Cameron, for the donation over Venmo. Cameron says that they like the guest, but not his arguments. Yeah, I agree. The guest is kind, but his arguments are not good. Also, we've already heard all of these arguments from him. He doesn't realize it, but Joseph, you've given all the same arguments you gave last time you were up here, and it's not going to go any better the second time. So I want to read you, though, something really quick. Let me ask you a question. How come Isaiah 9, if it's so clearly about Jesus, is not in the New Testament?
Why should it be in the New Testament?
Well, if it was such a smoking gun prophecy about Jesus, how come not a single New Testament writer knew about it?
I don't think no New Testament person knew about it, or writer knew about it.
Well, they didn't.
They had They
didn't, and I'm going to demonstrate to you why. Okay. So this is Isaiah 9:6, as the New Testament authors would have been reading it. And it says something that I don't think you're going to enjoy. It says in verse 6, because a child was born for us, a son also given to us, whose sovereignty was upon his shoulder, and he is named Messenger of Great Counsel. For I will bring peace upon the rulers, peace and health to him. His sovereignty is great, and his peace has no boundary upon the throne of David and his kingdom, to make it prosper and to uphold it with righteousness. Now, the New Testament authors, this is why I know that they weren't inspired by God, because they couldn't read Hebrew. Every time they quoted from the Old Testament, they quoted from the Greek. And I know that to be the case because I had to learn Greek and Hebrew. So the fact of the matter is, this is the edition of Isaiah 9:6 that the New Testament authors were actually reading, which is obviously why they didn't quote from it, because it doesn't say anything close to what the other one says, and certainly wouldn't point towards any sort of messianic man god. So why didn't they know? If this is not the appropriate text, why didn't the New Testament authors know about it?
Do you mean that they actually coded this verse?
No, verses aren't coded.
Okay, do you mean that they actually read this verse?
Did you say quoted?
Mm-hmm.
No, the New Testament never, anywhere, quotes Isaiah 9:6. And the reason is because the New Testament authors could only read Greek. They weren't actually Jewish people who could read Hebrew. If you read the Greek Old Testament, the prophecy that you think is so clearly about Jesus is so clearly not about Jesus. Now, according to the New Testament authors, the Greek Septuagint was the authoritative text, which is why they quoted from it as though it was the authoritative text. Why do we have two texts claiming to be authoritative, but they can't get something as simple as this prophecy right?
What I'm not getting is, are you saying that they should mention this in their Gospels, or mentioning that Jesus Christ is God? I'm not getting.
I know you're not getting it.
I'm not getting your argument.
Okay. The prophecy that you and I read first is from the Hebrew Bible, and it doesn't need to be interpreted as a God-man. Now, when we have the translation into Greek, it reads differently. It's not about a God-man, because whoever was doing the Greek Septuagint translation knew that it wasn't about a God-man, or they just had a different manuscript that they were translating from. Either way,
definitely different manuscript.
That's actually my personal opinion. I think they had a different manuscript. I think there were multiple manuscripts floating around. But that being, especially Isaiah has a ton of different manuscript
1,000% Isaiah.
So anyways, the long and short of it is, if the Greek Septuagint is the authoritative document that the New Testament authors are quoting from, then that means you're tied in to believing that this is the authoritative reading of Isaiah 9:6.
I don't think so, because
all right, show me one quotation in the Gospels where they quoted from the Hebrew.
In Hebrews 1 verse 8.
I said, well, first of all, the book of Hebrews doesn't quote from the Hebrew text. I said, show me one spot in the Gospels where they quote from the Hebrew text and not from the Greek text.
Oh yeah, when Jesus read, I don't know which chapter in Isaiah, which says that
This will be fun.
Which says that,
No, baby, this is your favorite.
I have been anointed.
I love it. Yes, that's Luke chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what he's quoting from?
I think it's in Isaiah, but I don't know what chapter it is.
Listen, guys, nobody leave. This is one of my favorite subjects. I cannot wait. I am so tickled that I get to do this with this guest right now. I want to pull open a document, and I'm going to demonstrate something to you that I don't think you've ever seen before.
All right. And then also in John 1.
Well, we're only doing one at a time, so you can't just jump around from verse to verse.
That's okay.
That's okay. Until you and I have split consciousnesses that allow us to talk two different conversations at once, we can only do one thing at a time. All right.
It's really funny, but yeah, that's all right.
All right, so this is the quotation that we get from the Gospel of John. Can you read it? Is it visible on the screen, or do I need to make it bigger?
Is this the Greek?
I'll blow it up.
What you call it? What's the name of that site? The Greek No, not that thing.
The site.
You know what I'm talking
the
about.
site that you want to get most likely is intertextuality dot Bible, I think is the name of it.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, guys, check out intertextual.bible, and they've got a whole list. Yeah, you're going to want to chug that water. All right, so this is a quotation. Now, the New Testament says this. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, and to set the oppressed free." Now, as it turns out, that doesn't appear in any Old Testament manuscript. So I want to know what he was quoting from, because if you read it from the Greek Septuagint, which is this manuscript tradition here, it doesn't say the same thing. It literally ends with sight to the blind, which is in the wrong order. It says to proclaim liberty to the captives and sight to the blind. So they get these two verses swapped. And then this section here, they just improvise. It says here to proclaim freedom to the prisoners, but in the Greek it says to heal the brokenhearted, which is not actually quoted in the New Testament, which is weird. And if you compare it to the Masoretic text, the Hebrew text here, it doesn't match that either. In the Masoretic text, it doesn't say anything about recovery of sight to the blind at all. That's just not even there. It does include the brokenhearted, but again, the brokenhearted doesn't appear in the New Testament quotation. So we have literally no idea what Jesus was, or actually Luke was quoting from in Luke chapter 4.
Okay, so if you have no idea, why do you say it's not from the Hebrew then?
Because he makes a quotation, and it doesn't appear in our Greek manuscripts, and it doesn't appear in our Hebrew manuscripts. It doesn't appear in any of our manuscripts.
So you must have used another manuscript then.
Yes, and based on all the evidence we have from the New Testament, it would have been an alternative Greek manuscript, because we have no quotations from the Hebrew text in the New Testament.
Are these the only, what you call it?
In fact,
is the Masoretic text the only, what you call it? Is it the only Hebrew manuscript?
No, the Masoretic text is like the starting point for most of the Hebrew Old Testament. But like when you read an NRSV, they usually have what is called a critical edition of the Hebrew text, where they look at the Masoretic text, they compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls, they compare it to the Septuagint, they compare it to everything else that we have extant from the Church Fathers and from the Talmud quotations, and then they put together what they think is the most likely original reading, even though we don't have any originals.
All right, but let me ask you this: from what Jesus said, do you think that this writing is a false writing, or it's actually there but it has variants?
No, what I'm saying is we've got problematic readings of the New Testament. There's no situations in which the authors of the Gospels actually quote word for word anything from a Hebrew manuscript. They only quote from the Greek manuscripts. And some of those quotes we can't even find in the Greek manuscripts. Like they don't seem to exist anywhere. For example, here's another one. Have you read Psalm 8:2? What is that?
Could you refresh my memory on it?
Baby.
Is that a dog?
That's a baby.
Well, that's a baby?
Yes.
All right, I don't know who's got a baby in the background, but we gotta quiet that thing.
Let me.
I mean, we love babies, but they can't be on the live. It'll get taken down.
Yeah, let me just move the room. Okay.
All right. When Jesus was healing in the temple and the Pharisees came to chastise him, he said, "Do you not hear what these are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes, have you never read, out of the mouths of infants and nursing babies you have prepared praise for yourself?" Now I'm going to ask you a question. Can you go to your Old Testament and tell me where that quotation is from?
That should be... it's not Psalm 8, right?
It's Psalm 8.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, can you show me in Psalm 8 where it says you have prepared praise for yourself?
I don't have my Bible here.
I've got it.
Go and get it.
Don't worry.
Okay.
It says, out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes to silence the enemy and the avenger. A little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So what did Jesus actually say?
Out of, okay, let me see. You read from Psalm 8, verse 2, right? Then,
because the New Testament has him quoting the Old Testament saying, out of the mouths of infants and nursing babes, you have prepared praise for yourself. But when we go to that psalm, it says, out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes to silence the enemy and the avenger.
so what does that actually mean?
Not even close to the same thing. This is about war. Founding a bulwark. Do you know what a bulwark is?
No.
A bulwark is like a reinforcement for the city wall, or a siege engine that you could put against the wall of a city. It's like a point of a physical point of opposition in war.
Okay. Well, you're saying something?
Well, my point is, the New Testament can't even quote the Old Testament. And when it does quote the Old Testament, it almost invariably quotes from the Greek Old Testament. According to the New Testament authors, it is the Greek Old Testament that they are saying is authoritative.
All right, can you hold on a bit? I need to get my own Bible. I need to look up another verse here. Just a moment.
That's right, Kendall. The Gospels were written in Greek, not in Hebrew. Mike, thank you for the 5 subbies. W. Mike Thorne, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Guys, we crushed our sub goal. We smashed it.
Yes, we did.
Could you show me the verse again?
Yeah.
Where you at?
It's in the book of Matthew, and you're going to look at 21. In fact, there's another prophecy in the book of Matthew, chapter 21, that I would love to read if you want to.
All right. Could you scroll down to Psalms? Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll say that this is a variation in the scriptures.
Yeah, and there's so many of them. In fact, almost every quotation that the New Testament makes of the Old Testament, it's not a good quotation, but it almost always comes from the Greek. Thank you, Mike, for the dog. So I say that to say the reason why Isaiah 9 never appeared in the New Testament is because they couldn't read Hebrew. They were only reading from the Greek, which means they held that the Greek Old Testament is authoritative enough.
Yay, corgi butts! I love the corgi butts.
Can I mention something on?
Yeah, 1 second. Snoopa, you're in my live, like crying and making false claims about me every time I go live. I would love for you to get the Holy Spirit and get in my guest box, and then you can demonstrate that the Holy Spirit is revealing truth to you. Joseph, go for it.
All right. So in context, when Jesus says praise, and in Psalm it says you've established strength or bulwark because of your force to steal the enemy and the avenger.
Why?
I'm understanding it.
So you're going to do the gymnastics and say that going to war is the same thing as praising?
No, that I was going to give an example of how they did that. They actually went to war by praising God.
That's irrelevant. So it says, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes, you have prepared praise for yourself. Do infants and nursing babes go to war?
Out of the mouths of infants and nursing babes, you have prepared praise for yourself. No, they don't go to war.
Okay. So Jesus is suggesting in the book of Matthew that the children are praising him in the temple because the Old Testament has some sort of sideways prophecy about it. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes, you have prepared praise for yourself? This is about children praising somebody. Children. And that Jesus is getting this from something. You know what he's not getting it from?
From what?
He's not getting it from the Hebrew Old Testament. Do you know where he's getting it from?
Where is he getting it from?
He's getting it from the Greek Septuagint. Because if you read the Greek Septuagint, it says something different than this. It doesn't say this in the Greek Septuagint. Because the Greek Septuagint and the Hebrew Masoretic text disagree in thousands of locations. Some of them small disagreements, some of them very large disagreements. Sometimes entire chapters are just missing from the book.
All right, so my question is, if this was wrong, then why didn't the elders just tell him, no, you're lying? It doesn't say that.
Well, first of all, let's get one thing clear. It doesn't say anything about what the elders responded. Second thing is that this is a mythological story told by somebody who was a Christian many years after Jesus died. The fact that they just happened to not make up what they thought the elders said afterwards is irrelevant to me.
To you. Okay. So if it's irrelevant to you, then it means that you are ignoring what it really meant. Or
no, not at all. You're suggesting that when Jesus responded to the elders, that the elders agreed with him, which is logically absurd because the same elders executed him.
Well, they didn't execute him for getting this verse wrong, did they?
So, they execute him for committing blasphemy. So it says here that Jesus said the thing and then he left. It doesn't say that he said anything. It doesn't say that the elders agreed with anybody. It's just a poorly written narrative. So what you're suggesting is that you're going to insert something into the narrative that's not there and then claim that it justifies your belief about what this passage means.
No, but what I'm failing to understand is that does it make the story false, or it's a variation of what actually happened?
That's what I'm trying to tell you. The two different texts don't agree with each other. One says one thing, one says another thing. Now, it just so happens the one that the New Testament quotes from is the Greek Septuagint. However, almost all modern Bibles are resting upon the Hebrew Old Testament texts. Now, that is a problem because they do not agree. How do we know which manuscript tradition is the authoritative manuscript tradition?
Like I'm saying that we can have variations in the story, but being able to say that this is wrong or right is what's really important, because this is a very old document anyway. And if you're able to say that, okay, this didn't happen, but it says it happened, then we have a problem there. But if we have one story with two variations or three variations, then we can't say that this story didn't happen. We're saying that we just have variations in what was said about it, but not really that it's not true. It's false.
You didn't listen to anything I said, so we'll just try this from the top. This is Isaiah 9:6. This is where we started. This is the Greek text. And it says, "Because a child was born for us, a son also given to us, whose sovereignty was upon his shoulder, and he is named Messenger of Great Counsel. For I will bring peace upon the rulers, and peace and health to him." This is altogether different from the reading that we get in the Bible in Isaiah 9:6, verse 7. It says, "Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." And the point that I've been making, Joseph, that you haven't been grasping is that the Old Testament as we have it is a variable text, and some of those variances are incredible. And one of the most incredible variances is right here, because in the Hebrew text, it would lead you to believe that whoever this is, they have some sort of a divine kingly status. But if you read it in the Greek text, the text that your Messiah quoted, it's something completely different. It's just about a king. No divinity, no God, no nothing. It's just a regular old king.
Well, if that was the only text, then I would go with what you're saying, right? But if it's not, and the other verses, other passages that actually says that actually emphasize on the divinity of Jesus, then I'll go back to the divinity of Jesus.
Ethan, thank you for the $6.66 over Venmo. W666 Ethan, and Hail Satan. All right, so what you're saying is that the New Testament validates the Old Testament reading. I would love for you to do that. Demonstrate to me that I should care what the New Testament has to say about anything in the Old Testament.
Well, Jesus came as it is said in Isaiah 53, right?
Wrong again.
And he did.
Nope.
What do you mean by wrong?
Show me in Isaiah 53. All right, so we're gonna go over Isaiah 53. It was kind of due time. We cover it every single time we go live because it's the only prophecy typically that you guys have actually read. I know you haven't read the other ones.
I've read the whole Bible.
No, you haven't. Which is why the only prophecies you could find were the two most common prophecies anyone has ever brought up. Can you name me 5 prophecies? In fact, there was one in Matthew 21 that I wanted to go to next, and we've somehow forgot about it. Can you name me even 5 prophecies in the Bible?
Okay. One that Jesus was going to die on the cross, and he was going to say that...
That's not a prophecy. Show it to me.
Okay, that he was going to die. It says that it pleased him to crush him, right?
That's Isaiah 53, and that's not about the Messiah. It is about the nation of Israel, but we're going to give you at least one. You know one prophecy. What's the other one?
Okay, in Psalm 22.
Psalm 22.
When Jesus actually...
Psalm 22 is not a prophecy, but the New Testament does call it a prophecy. There's two. What's next?
The one I quoted in Isaiah 7.
Fair enough, Isaiah 7.
And in Micah 5 verse 2.
Micah 5 doesn't say anything about the Messiah.
It does. It says that out of Bethlehem, is it?
Oh, Micah 5:2.
Let me open it.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about a Messiah. Mm-hmm. It talks about a king, but I'm glad you know that particular prophecy. Micah 5:2 talks about a king, not a Messiah, but we're going to give it to you. So there's 4. You're doing better than I thought you would. What's the 5th one?
Thank you. Zephaniah, I think it's 10, if it's not 12.
Zechariah 9:9.
10 and 12. So, is it Zechariah or is Zephaniah? Zechariah.
Yeah. Zechariah doesn't.
I think it's 10 when it's.
Zechariah 10 doesn't.
When he talks about. Okay, when he talks about the ones that when they pierce my side.
Oh yes, they will look upon the one whom they would pierce. That's Zechariah 12.
Yeah, that's 12. And then in 10, he talks about the 23 pieces of silver.
30 pieces of silver, which isn't a prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
Have you actually read that whole chapter? Because what's happening in that particular chapter is a performance where the prophet is behaving as a wicked shepherd, and he's throwing away the price of a wicked shepherd. It's not even a prophecy. It's him acting something out. But fair enough.
I think it's a parallel to that.
You knew 5. It's not a parallel. You knew 5 prophecies that the New Testament listed, and I'm proud of you for doing it. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. It's 10:14 now. It will take, I guarantee, based on your personality, the remainder of this live to cover all of Isaiah 53. Because I'm going to read it in context, and I'm going to explain to you why it's not about the Messiah, why it's about the nation of Israel, and you're going to say, nuh-uh, 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 and we're going to spend a whole 45 minutes, and you're just going to say, nuh-uh, and we're going to agree to disagree. Would you rather do that for the next 45 minutes, or would you rather go over a whole cluster of prophecies like the ones that you just mentioned? Because we can deal with all 5 of those prophecies, actually 4 of them, because one was we can deal with all 4 of those prophecies, probably 15 minutes.
All right, let's do the 15-minute one.
All right, so let's go to Micah 5 first.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put up on the screen.
All right, thank you.
But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origins whose origin is from old, from ancient days. So it says he's going to be a ruler in Israel. Was Jesus a ruler in Israel?
He said his kingdom is not of this world. So
yeah, but was he a ruler in Israel?
Time to rule is not. Well, they named him the king of the Jews for a reason.
Who named him the king of the Jews?
We could say that.
Who did?
Romans did.
No, they didn't. They mocked him. They put a sign above his head saying King of the Jews to mock him. They weren't calling him the King of the Jews. If they actually believed he was the king, because he claimed to be a king. That's the whole point. Like if I claimed to be the best magician on the earth, but I was actually a dog shit magician, then somebody would mock me as being a magician. That's just how these claims work. Mm-hmm. When someone claims to be a king, but they aren't actually a king, then it's well within their right to mock you for never being a king. So if Jesus is a king, I need some evidence that he ever actually sat on the throne, because this says that he's going to rule within Israel.
Okay, so if we look at the other parts of this verse, like whose origins is from old, and again it's saying, but O you Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are little ones, from you shall come forth. He is from the olden days, and yet he shall come forth.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
I'm so glad you asked. Do you know who Ephrathah is?
Ephrathah is there are two Bethlehems. And Ephrathah is actually where Jesus was born.
So Ephrathah is the ancient matriarch that gave birth to the line of David. And Bethlehem is one of the forefathers in the lineage of David. Obviously, you recognize Bethlehem as the home of King David where he was born. So they're mentioning the ancestry of the king. And these are the oldest ancestors of King David, which is why it's saying that this ruler who's going to rule in Israel, his ancestry is from ancient days. He's going to be from the line of David.
Okay. But from Ephrathah, after that, who actually came from Ephrathah?
Bethlehem.
If you're right, then.
Bethlehem. Well, Ephrathah is the name of the location, but the matriarch was Ephratah, and she gave birth to, I think, 2 different sons, and she was married twice. And one of the people in her lineage was Bethlehem.
But you do know that there are 2 physical Bethlehems.
Yes, but only one of them is the city referred to as the city of David.
Yeah, exactly. So
yes.
Ephrathah is the one. That's what it's actually referring to.
Yes.
It's not referring to a person.
It is. It's referring to the lineage of King David, and both of these 2 individuals are in the lineage of King David, and this is the location where King David came from. This is a callback saying that whoever is going to rule in Israel is from the line of David. Their origin is from old.
So if it's from old, the line of David wasn't an old line at this point of time.
Yeah, it was. It was 1,000 years old.
1,000?
He was the second king in Israel. How can you have? Not only was he the second king in Israel, but his lineage was one of the oldest lineages in the Book of Chronicles. His lineage began right after the Exodus from Egypt. Like, how can you get older?
Okay, so I guess everybody's lineage is old here.
Well, we're talking about a kingly lineage. It's going to rule in Israel. And look what it says.
Yeah.
It says about this king, he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord and the majesty of the name of Yahweh his God. So it literally says that Yahweh is his God, so it can't be a trinity. And it says they will live secure, for now he will be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be the one of peace. Have you read all of Micah, or have you only read this small snippet from chapter 5?
No, I've read it all.
Okay,
and,
so what is the era of peace in the book of Micah?
Well, in the era of peace is when Jesus comes and rules for 1,000 years.
Yeah, so whoever this king is, he's saying that this king is going to be the one of peace.
About my favorites,
which is it is, which is chapter 4. He tells you about the era of peace in chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Can you open chapter 4 then?
Yeah. It says, in the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's temple shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. People shall stream to it, and many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many people, and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but they will sit under their own vines and under their own fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. This is the peace that Micah is referring to in chapter 5 when he says this king is coming. He's going to rule in Israel. His origin is from old, and he's going to be the one of peace. That's what they're expecting.
But this hasn't happened, right?
Yes, which is why
It's yet to happen.
Which is why Jesus couldn't have fulfilled Micah chapter 5 because it didn't happen.
Like I'm saying that he will fulfill it.
I know you will. I know you believe he will, Joseph, but the way prophecy works is you can't say Jesus fulfilled it if you're going to turn around and tell me that he will fulfill it. Anything that he's going to fulfill in the future is by definition an unfulfilled prophecy.
So if he fulfills part of the prophecy and the rest of the prophecies to come, does that make it wrong?
Not only does that make it wrong, but he didn't even fulfill part of it. Unless he is actually a ruler in Israel, he didn't fulfill any of it.
So when the wise men were coming to bow down to him, what did that represent then?
Didn't represent anything.
Why did these wise men actually go?
It's a fun story that somebody made up about Jesus. So
well, now it's
three-ish, we don't really know how many, three-ish magi, according to the book of Matthew, go and visit Jesus, and they offer him gifts, and they do so because, according to the book of Matthew, Jesus is going to be the next king, which is why King Herod has sent his people to go and unalive Jesus, because he doesn't want a threat to his throne. But as it turns out, Jesus wasn't a threat to anybody's throne because he was never a king. And Micah 5 is actually about a king.
So are you saying that these wise men didn't actually know better than what you're saying right now?
First of all,
and they actually went with gifts?
Well, first of all, they didn't exist, number one. Second of all, they weren't Jewish. They have nothing to do with the Jewish text. They were from the East. So they're invoking Eastern mysticism now. So I don't believe that these wise men existed. And even if they did exist, it's irrelevant. Three people that came from the East don't get to decide who is sitting on the throne of King David. Until Jesus sits on the throne of King David, it does not matter if people think he will be the king. What matters is if he actually is the king. I could say that I'm the president all day long, but until I'm in that Oval Office, I'm not the president.
So you mean to say that Herod just killed all these children from just a myth?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
Well, first of all, that didn't happen either. There is absolutely zero record of the mass unalivement of children in and around the area of Bethlehem. That is, again, fiction by the gospel author of Matthew. If that actually happened, there would undoubtedly be some sort of written documentation for it. People who get genocided tend to leave, there's like written records of it. Like when Alexander went through the known world and just went on a spree conquering every nation.
He was beating everybody's ass. Everyone has like a record of that.
That's right. All the nations that he conquered wrote about it. In fact, nations that weren't even conquered by him wrote about it. Like, we're going to get the fuck out of this guy's way. He's crushing everybody. Okay, so when these types of very large scale events happen, somebody writes about it, but nobody wrote about this. I have no reason to believe that the king of Judea issued an edict to execute all the babies 2 and under.
Well, in that case, then this book would have been a mythical book, and it wouldn't have made it as a religious book, because people who were alive at that time, actually read this book, and they affirmed this book. So
no, they didn't.
I really don't. I don't buy what you're saying right now.
That didn't happen at all. No, the people who the people who lived in Judea rejected this book. Mm-hmm. This book was only accepted by Christians living outside of Judea, not by the Jews. The Jews rejected Jesus and all of this gospel nonsense. So, but I want to address your first point. your first point was that this book wouldn't have survived literarily unless it was saying things that were true. But that's not true at all, because we've got the writings of Joseph Smith, which clearly weren't true, that people think is true. We've got the Quran that clearly says things that are untrue, that people think is true. So just because a book claims to be true, and just because some people believe it, doesn't mean that the book itself is actually true.
Yeah, but the Quran doesn't write history that people actually saw.
Yeah, it does.
And no, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
Like what?
Have you read the
It
Hadith?
actually does.
It quite literally says that the Prophet Muhammad split the moon. And if you read the Hadiths, there are people in the Hadiths writing from the time of Muhammad that claim to have witnessed it.
No, but the Hadiths were written 200 years after Muhammad, and
the
that he
Gospel
split
of
the
Matthew was written 100 years after Jesus.
No, it wasn't. It was actually.
It actually
written,
was.
What?
It was written in the 1st century.
That's not true.
No, it was written in the 2nd century.
Why don't we
And
have?
actually have dating on that.
Why don't we have a single manuscript of the Gospels from the 1st century?
Well, why don't we have a single document from
why
Alexander the Great's life?
We do.
Take that story.
We've got a bunch.
We don't.
We got a bunch of documents from Alexander's life.
They're all written 400 years after Alexander the Great.
Oh, that's not true.
No, they
about
weren't.
Julius
They were
Caesar?
written during, sir. They were written during his time, during
So
his
where are those?
conquests.
You can even
They're literally everywhere.
you can
You
even
can literally go
never
to these
seen them.
places. Well, that's because you're using your Christian eyes. Okay, we actually have evidence. Sorry, Justin. You know I don't play about Alexander.
I know. You can even read in the Greek writings of the Jews. Have you read the book of Maccabees?
I haven't really read it.
The book of
Say that.
Maccabees was written in Greek during the time of the Greek rule, shortly after the empires split between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies and the other two. So you can read in real time, even in your own Bible, if you buy the right one, about Alexander and the Greeks.
And there's a reason why. There's a certain place in Upper Egypt called Alexandria because it's based off of Alexander after he conquered it.
Yeah. So
I don't
so
say
this is not
Alexander was a mythical character.
So this is not a great argument, because we've got lots of evidence from Alexander's lifetime that he did the things
can
that
you
he
present
did.
the documents?
But I'm sure I could, but typically we don't have a debate about whether or not I can prove Alexander existed. I would love, if you think that's important to you, I would love to take some time over the next couple of days, and I'll compile all the resources that demonstrate that Alexander existed and that he conquered all the people.
No, I don't say he didn't exist, but the earliest records are 400 years after Alexander. So
that's not
what I'm
true.
saying.
We quite literally have records of him from the people he conquered at the time they were being conquered. One of those people groups being the Jewish people. The Jewish people wrote about him shortly after he passed away, like within a decade or two.
Yeah, but I'm talking about what he did from when he grew up, when he became a general, when he united all of Greece and went on his expeditions and conquered Persia and all that. You only find it in those chronicles that are
No, you don't.
You only find 400 years.
No,
afterward.
wrong. You're wrong again. All of those cultures wrote about him. Every single one of them. Every Mesopotamian culture that was conquered by Alexander the Great wrote about Alexander coming in and conquering them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So what you're suggesting...
Some of them have signed peace treaties, so that way they didn't get their ass mollywopped more than what they already were. And he was 30 by the time he conquered all of the area of Asia Minor. He was a badass. I love that Macedonian.
So, but that's all of this is a nonsense talking point. You're just saying that the New Testament is true because it's true. So I don't believe it's true, and you haven't given me a reason to believe that it's true. Now we're talking about the prophecies because you think the prophecy somehow can demonstrate that it's true, but the prophecy that we just looked at, you've already admitted wasn't fulfilled yet. So if you're going to say that the prophecies demonstrate that Jesus is the Messiah, then I need to see a prophecy that he actually fulfilled.
So why was he born in Bethlehem, Ephrata, then? Is this just a coincidence, then?
I don't think it is a coincidence. I think it's a narrative. I think it is a narrative ploy. I don't actually think he was born there, but let's assume that he was born there. How many people were born in Bethlehem in the first century?
There are many people that are born in Bethlehem that fit this narrative.
Well, he doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative is that he's going to be a king. So how many people were born in Bethlehem that weren't kings?
There are so many.
That's right. There's many. Yes. Being born in Bethlehem doesn't make you a king. It doesn't make you the fulfillment of this prophecy. This prophecy isn't about a normal Joe who gets born in Bethlehem. It's about an actual ruler in Israel. And until he is a ruler in Israel, he didn't fulfill the prophecy.
So when he becomes a ruler in Israel, that's when you'll believe it?
When he becomes a ruler in Israel, I'll be glad to say he fulfilled Micah 5:2.
So you're just waiting for that?
If it happens, I will tell you that he fulfilled Micah 5:2. When Jesus comes back and he's on the throne in Israel, I'll be more than happy to say he fulfilled it.
Yeah, well, he will come back and he will.
I know you believe it. I know you believe it. Can you show me one that he did fulfill, though?
In Psalm 22.
Psalm 22 is not even a prophecy. Do you really want to do this?
How is it not a prophecy yet he did exactly what it said?
He didn't, actually. So we'll start easy. We're going to read Deuteronomy 18, the test of a prophet. It's wild to me that people will accept any words on a page as a prophecy. I'm going to prove to you why you don't actually think that this is a prophecy, that you're just lying to yourself. But Deuteronomy 18 says, any prophet who presumes to speak in my name a word that I have not commanded the prophet to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall be unalived. You may say to yourself, how can we recognize a word that the Lord has not spoken? If a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, but the thing does not take place or prove true, it is a word that the Lord has not spoken. So a prophecy is something that is testable, and it's obviously something that is discernible, meaning the prophet has to make a claim, and then that claim is observed to either be true or to come true. So a prophecy isn't just some words are on a page that sound similar to something else. And I'm going to prove to you that you don't actually believe that. And I know you don't believe that because I'm going to read to you something. Before we read Psalm 22, I'm going to read to you something. This is Isaiah 65:9. Isaiah 65:9 says, I will bring forth descendants. Did I fulfill that prophecy because I have descendants?
What does it say? I will bring descendants.
It doesn't matter. You've already conceded that context doesn't matter. Did I fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah 65:9? Thank you, Selt, for the galaxy. W Selt, I really appreciate that galaxy.
Oh, I missed it.
Okay, so are you suggesting that I did not fulfill Isaiah 65:9 because there's clear context there?
No, you are the one who's not taking context, really.
Joseph, I asked you an easy yes or no question. Did I fulfill Isaiah 65:9?
No, you haven't fulfilled. It's not talking about you. You haven't told me anything about it.
And how do you know that I didn't fulfill Isaiah 65:9?
Because it's not a prophecy. You haven't told me anything. You just said I will.
It is a statement about the future. It says, I will bring forth descendants, and I brought forth descendants. How do you know that this is not a prophecy about me?
Is it talking about you?
I'm asking you, how do you know that it's not a prophecy about me?
Yes, because I wouldn't know if it's talking about you.
I'm asking you how.
Just told me that those words.
I'm asking you, how do you know? How do you know that it's not about me?
How would I know if it's about you? I don't know, because he just told me 2 words. I will bring descendants on the earth.
That's all you need to know. It's clearly about me. Guys, I told you, I'll tell you again, I am the Messiah. This is Jeremiah 4:31 has more words. It says, I heard the cry of a woman in labor, in anguish, as if one bringing forth her first child. I've done that twice. Did I fulfill a prophecy in Jeremiah 4:31?
What did it say again?
Jeremiah 4:31. I heard the cry of a woman in labor, in anguish, as if one bringing forth her first child. I've done that twice. Did I fulfill Jeremiah 4:31?
Again, why would it say it's talking about you?
I'm asking you, why is that not about me?
Because you're not, you don't believe in God anyway.
No, I'm asking you from a standpoint of just reading the text. How am I not the fulfillment? Thank you, Mama, for the pumpkin.
Because it's not talking about you.
How do you know?
Because if you read prior to that, we don't see your name mentioned. We don't see deconstruction there.
Oh, is Jesus' name mentioned in any of these prophecies?
No, we see his nature in
But is
prophecies.
his name mentioned?
No, his name is not mentioned.
Okay, so you can't say that
nature.
this prophecy isn't about me just because my name's not in it. So try again.
You see your nature in it? What is it?
My nature
that's in it, then?
My nature is in it. It says, I heard the cry of a woman in labor, in anguish, as if one bringing forth her first child. It doesn't say anything about anybody's nature. It's just a blank statement. So did I fulfill a prophecy in Jeremiah 4:31? And if not,
Like
how do you know? Oh, we got
saying.
we got JCM in here rebuking us in the name of Jesus again. Good to see you, JCM. Welcome in. Also, someone come get your drunk mom.
Like I'm saying, if we don't see anything about you in the scripture, then why should we believe it's you? What do you have?
Thank you. Exactly. So here's what you're proving to me, which I knew you would. When you look at an actual prophecy, it has to be read in context, and it has to actually be making a claim that is testable. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so the reason why Jeremiah 4:31 isn't about me, and the reason why Isaiah 65:9 isn't about me, is because the context is clearly about something else. Now, let's read Psalm 22, keeping in mind that context and language determines how prophecy works. So Psalm 22
So we confirmed
says,
you're the Messiah.
I am the
Did
Messiah.
you read the whole list?
I didn't. I can read them more. Do you think I should?
You should. Also, get ready because I'm about to wash your feet.
In fact, JCM and Snoopa have already caused Jeremiah 20 verse 10 to be true, which says, I hear whispering, terror is all around. Denounce him. Let us denounce him. There have been people denouncing me all night tonight, fulfilling Jeremiah 20 verse 10, thereby indicating I am the Messiah. I fulfilled 3 prophecies tonight.
Praise you.
Okay, the problem is with you. You just say it's not, but you don't give us what does it mean?
Oh, so again, yes, context matters. All right. I'm glad you can come to the table and admit that context matters. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Nefarious. Okay,
really
Psalm 22, the context is very clear. It's a psalm of David. Le David Mizmor, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is David speaking. Is David saying anything about the future?
Like I said, the Bible is
David saying anything about the future?
Yes, he's prophesying in the future.
Oh, so which word in this first sentence is about the future?
My God, why have you forsaken me?
Okay, is have a future?
There's so much here.
Is have a future verb or a present or a past tense verb?
He was speaking in the spirit.
Oh, so the context doesn't matter. The language and context don't matter. Okay.
What do you mean?
All right, then I fulfilled Jeremiah 4:31. I heard the cry of a woman in labor, in anguish, as if one bringing forth her first child. He just said it. He just said it. It doesn't matter if it's in the future tense. Praise me. Praise me. Our God is an awesome God. I reign from heaven on earth over people who don't read prophecies properly. All right, so Joseph. Does the grammatical language of the prophecy matter in how it's read?
Okay, I'll answer you with this. Why did Jesus ask?
That's not an answer to my question, Joseph.
I'm answering your question. Let me answer your question.
Does grammar matter in how a text is read and interpreted?
In prophecy, it does not matter.
Oh, so anything can be a prophecy, even if it's in the past tense.
Well, we see if it's a prophecy if it's fulfilled. That's how you said it yourself.
Okay,
no,
all right.
Deuteronomy 18.
All right, so we're going to show
Deuteronomy 18.
We're going to show another prophecy that was fulfilled, and I guarantee he's going to say it's not a prophecy that was fulfilled. This is
Right.
Deuteronomy 20. When you draw near to a town to fight against it, offer it terms of peace. If it accepts your terms of peace and surrenders to you, then all the people in it shall serve you as forced labor. If it accepts your terms of, but if it does not accept your terms of peace and makes war against you, then you will besiege it. And when the Lord your God gives it into your hand, you shall put all of its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your plunder the women, the children, livestock, and everything else in the town, all of its spoil. This has happened all the time. In fact, it happened quite recently during the war between Israel and Gaza. Did they fulfill a prophecy in Deuteronomy?
Where did you see it happen like that?
Did you not see where the women were captured in war on both sides?
No, Israel didn't capture any.
They kidnapped war, yes, but both sides took hostages.
No, Israel didn't take any hostages.
both sides took hostages.
Can you show me the hostages that Israel took?
Yeah, we just.
Holy fuck. Not only that, like there was... Wait, are we talking about back then or now?
No, we're talking about
now. Yeah, there's actually visual evidence of them raping the women that they captured and thrown in prisons, saying that it was justified because there is no innocence in Gaza. So, try the fuck again.
I know they actually get arrested for that, so...
They didn't, by the way.
They actually arrested an Israeli soldier for stealing figs, for stealing olives in Palestine. So I don't know what you're talking about.
What the fuck does that have to do with innocent people getting raped, taken out of their homes because they think that that's their promised land? The Gazan women and children, you sick malakish.
Oh, all right. Well, I won't argue with you.
Yeah, don't, because you will lose that fucking fight.
Your language just speaks a lot about you, so yeah.
Okay, so don't talk about Hanji here. Just not listen. I know that like hearing a woman talk makes your pee-pee shrivel, but you can't disrespect her here.
Why do you like talking about pee-pees?
Because I know that you're insecure when women talk, because almost all the Christians that come up here really are.
Are you a prophet?
I am a prophet. I'm the Messiah. I already showed you.
Right.
All right. So according to the narrative, at the start of the war, Hamas offered to release all hostages in exchange for Israel releasing all Palestinian prisoners. This was one of the beginning stages of the war. That there was a hostage exchange that took place, and there have been multiple hostage exchanges that have been offered and constructed since then. And the actual source for this comes from a gazillion different news sites and people actually on the ground. So,
did you read the part where it says prisoners for hostages?
Yeah. When you take somebody else from another location that's not your location, that's called a hostage.
Right.
So, but even let's imagine for a second that only Hamas took hostages. Well, that just means that only Hamas fulfilled the prophecy. Did Hamas fulfill this prophecy when they went to war and took hostages?
This is so silly.
I know it's so silly getting like intellectually dog walked on every point. So, is it true that this is a prophecy because people took hostages in war?
This is not a prophecy. This is a command.
Oh, okay. So, but you just told me that any text can be a prophecy.
Where did I say that?
You just said it 5 minutes ago that any text can be a prophecy as long as it comes true in the future. So
you're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, so we'll try again. So not any text in the Old Testament can be a prophecy.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Okay, how do we know then what is a prophecy in the Old Testament?
Well, when it actually gets fulfilled.
Okay, well this got fulfilled
In the New Testament.
People took No. You can't say that it only gets fulfilled in the New Testament. That is circular reasoning. You're saying the New Testament is true because the New Testament is true. So if this prophecy gets fulfilled, it doesn't matter where or how it gets fulfilled, it is fulfilled. So this was fulfilled by Israel and by Gaza and by a bunch of other countries. So
have you read
is this a
Psalms 22?
Yeah, I have. So is this a prophecy?
No, you haven't.
I have, Joseph, and I promise we're going to get to it if you can give me.
Prophecy. I just told you.
I promise we're going to get to it if you can focus. Okay. So what is the difference between? So what is the difference between a decree and a prophecy?
So if the Lord says that if you don't pay your taxes you're going to jail, is that a prophecy?
I'm asking you, what is the difference between a decree and a prophecy?
That's just the same thing. I'm saying this is a law. If we put a law and
yes, and functionally,
Yeah.
what is the difference between a decree and a prophecy? What is it? What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that you can't control the outcome of a prophecy, but the outcome of a decree you can.
That's not the difference. The difference is that they're different genres of speaking. A prophecy is divine information about the future, about events that are going to happen. And a decree is not that. A decree is an edict or some sort of command as to what to do. Just like a psalm is not a prophecy. A psalm is something poetic that is written. You can't just say that anything is that anything is a prophecy because it sounds similar to something that somebody wrote later, because we've just demonstrated when people do things that are similar to Deuteronomy 20, you don't want that to be a prophecy.
Okay, so did David have control over the outcome of what would happen if he was writing in the Spirit? How would David have an outcome of saying, when my Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right side?
Well, that's a different prophecy, and David didn't write that. So that's written about King David. That's written about King David. So hold on. I know you want to pivot so hard from this point. How do you know that Moses wasn't writing a prophecy in the Spirit here?
Because you can control this outcome, I said.
Wrong again.
This outcome.
No, Moses couldn't. Moses couldn't control this outcome.
What do you mean by that?
Moses couldn't control this outcome.
It was enforceable. It was enforceable. He wasn't the one enforcing it.
The law is enforceable, but the situation cannot be dictated.
This is enforceable. This is enforceable.
I said the law is enforceable, but the scenario that is happening here still comes from God. That's why it says, Joseph, listen. That's why it says, when the Lord your God gives it into your hands. It's still something God is doing. In fact, this is even in the future tense. When the Lord your God gives it into your hands. So again, you haven't given me a compelling reason why a psalm can just be a prophecy by the mere fact that it said something, but why this can't be a mere prophecy by the same fact that it just said something.
Well, is this psalm a thing that David is just thinking of, like, oh, okay, Lord, why are you forsaking me? And then it gets added into the Bible. Are these just his words, or the Bible is actually inspired from the Spirit? So this is saying it. You would have to demonstrate, Joseph. I don't know if you know this, but when you talk while I'm talking, nobody can hear you. This whole conversation is being recorded on YouTube Live. It's going to be saved for eternity. And nobody is going to hear anything you've ever said. Every word you've ever said, our entire conversation in which you're talking while I'm talking, no one's ever going to hear it. They'll never hear you. So if you want people to hear your words, don't talk while I'm talking. My mic is louder than yours. All right.
Fantastic.
So you can read.
Okay, so Psalm 22 says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Does it say anything about the future?
No, but this was
okay. And who is
Jesus
me?
Actually says the same.
How do you know that this is written in the Spirit?
Because Jesus actually said the same words.
But why do I care? See, you're starting with the presupposition that Jesus is the Messiah and that Jesus is God, and because Jesus said something about this being prophetic, which he didn't actually say it, by the way. Jesus never said that this was a prophecy. But even if he did, you're still giving a circular argument. You're saying because Jesus said it's a prophecy, it is a prophecy. But I could do the same thing myself. I could read the prophecies and I can tell you, this is something that I did, it's fulfilled, and the proof that it's fulfilled is that I told you. And I told you it's true because I'm the Messiah.
Okay, you know what? I'll actually believe you if Jesus only said these words at the top, and there's nothing else in the chapter that actually talks about Jesus. So you can read the whole chapter, and then we see.
We can. Okay, so first of all, who's talking here?
That's David. David.
It's David, yeah. Does it say anything about the future?
He's not saying anything about the future.
Okay.
But as I was saying...
Are prophecies about the future typically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how do we know when somebody is talking about the future?
Well, in Bible literature, like I'm saying, it can take the present tense.
No,
but
I
still
disagree.
It's referring to the future.
Nope, that's cope. That's coping. That's not how language works. That's excuses that you guys make because you can't point to an actual prophecy that he fulfilled. So you have to turn to non-prophecies and say, oh my gosh, it sounds so similar to something somebody else said, so it must be a prophecy. But again, that doesn't work. I can do the same thing with...
Okay,
I can do the...
I can give you an example.
No one can hear you, Joseph. They cannot hear you when you're talking while I'm talking. I can do the same thing with all the prophecies and just say that I fulfilled them. In fact, that's what the Muslims do. The Muslims take Jewish and Christian texts that sound familiar to their faith, and then they just say it was a prophecy. You can't just say things sound familiar and therefore they are a prophecy. Prophecy is a specific genre, which is why when I do the same thing you're doing, but I apply it to me, you don't like it.
Okay, like I was saying, I can give you an example of this. If you want to hear it, it's fine. If you don't want, it's also fine. You can read the rest of the
example of what?
Of the chapter. Of when a prophecy can speak in present terms, yet it's speaking about future terms. It all speaks in parallel.
There's, I think, 2 occasions in the entire Old Testament where it talks about the past, or talks about the future in the past, and it tells you that it's talking about something from the future about the past. Like it tells you that's what's happening. But what you don't find is a single passage in the Bible where it just randomly talks about things in the future using a bunch of past tense language.
Okay, so when Jesus said, what did David mean when he spoke in the Spirit saying,
so Psalm 110?
At my right hand side. Yes. Sit on my right hand side till I
So
make
you're going to validate that Jesus is the Messiah by claiming that Jesus said something.
No.
Okay, so
I'm saying that
Joseph,
that was a
I need you to
that was spoken in the
Joseph,
present tense.
I need you to understand that it's not a prophecy, and you're not going to like this one either. Okay, so Psalm. This guy's just a mess of bad talking points. Psalm 110 is not a prophecy. It is, in fact, a psalm. It's written about King David, and it's even listed assurance of victory for God's priest king. Who's known as the priest king in the Old Testament?
Me.
It's Jesus.
It's not Jesus. It's King David. It's almost like whoever edited the NRSV knew what this one was about. So it says it's a song. Just listen. It's a Psalm of David. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. What is this word right here in Hebrew?
Yahweh.
Yeah. And what's this word?
Adonai.
Adonai, which means what?
Mm-hmm. Which means Lord.
It means my Lord, my King, my Master.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it says Yahweh says to my master, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Where do we find that elsewhere in the Bible? Do you know where?
No, I don't know that at the top of my head.
It's in 1 Kings chapter 5, and I think it's in verse 3. You know that my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him until he put them under the soles of his feet. Interesting that the psalm about King David is about his enemies being placed under his feet, a promise that God made, which the book of Kings said would happen. So there's no reason, there's not a single reason to read Jesus into this, especially because the rest of the psalm is using Davidic language about the king, which you would recognize if you bothered to read it. The Lord sends out from Zion your mighty scepter. Does King David have a scepter?
I guess he does since he's a king.
Yeah, who gets scepters in the ancient world? Were they all kings?
The kings.
Now, okay, so it's clearly about a king here. It says, rule in the midst of your foes. Who gets to rule in the midst of their foes? It's kings. It's a king. Okay, thank you. So Psalm 110 is clearly about King David.
Okay, so why does Jesus say that he was talking about him?
Well, I don't think Jesus said that, but if he did say it, he's an ignorant fool. And the reason, and you're gonna love this. Actually, you're gonna hate this. I'm gonna tell you exactly why the New Testament authors couldn't read Hebrew. Because if you actually go to Psalm 110 in the Greek Septuagint, Psalm 110 doesn't translate the passage appropriately, and they introduce a variant into the text. Surprise, surprise, the Septuagint is the problem. I can't make this bigger. Hold on, I don't know how to make it bigger. Can you read that Greek text? Okay, there we go. It's bigger now.
Yes.
Okay, so this word here, right here, is Kyrios. This is ha-Kyrios, the Lord. And this is this the genitive form of Kyrios? Ta-Kyrio, I think, is the genitive form of the same word, the Lord. So it literally,
Kyrios, yes.
Yeah. So it's referring to the same thing in the Greek. They didn't differentiate between Yahweh and the king. Whoever translated this was a dullard. And this is how I know that the authors of the Gospels couldn't read the Hebrew Old Testament. They could only read the Greek Old Testament. And when they got to this part in the Greek Old Testament, they couldn't figure out what the hell was happening because it literally says two different lords. How are there two different lords? It doesn't make any sense. But if they were reading it from the actual Hebrew text, they would have understood that it is in fact Yahweh talking to the king.
So Jesus didn't understand it? Why did he put himself in the verse then?
I already told you, I don't think Jesus even mentioned those words. Those are words that somebody put on his lips. Jesus, as far as we can tell, probably could read Hebrew and Aramaic, which is why I know he didn't get this wrong. He would have got this right. He would have at least known what was in the Greek and in the Hebrew, and he wouldn't have misunderstood it. So again, Joseph, just hold on. Again, Joseph, hold on. Your logic rests on if Jesus said it, it must be true. But you can't demonstrate a single reason why I would care anything Jesus says.
Yeah, because it'll get you wrong immediately.
Oh, it's not wrong. So if you can't demonstrate from the actual text why it means what Jesus said, then I don't care. See, all you're saying is that Jesus said it, therefore it must be true. But obviously, if I believed that, then I would be a Christian, but I don't believe that. If the Jewish people believed that when Jesus said something, that it was true, they would be Christians, but they're not. So in order for us to care what Jesus says, we need a reason to care what he says. And the reason why we don't care what he says is because every messianic prophecy in the Old Testament is about an actual king, which Jesus wasn't. And the prophecies that are mentioned in the New Testament aren't even prophecies. And sweater God, I don't know why you're always in my comments crying and calling me a liar and calling me names, but you don't have the balls to be a guest. Joseph has been here for 45 minutes, And he hasn't cried at all or called me any names, even though I've given him all kinds of smoke. He's been perfectly kind. I don't know why your balls shrink up into your abdomen the minute you walk into my live. If you have something to say, if you want to call me a name, you can get in here and you can do it to my face. Otherwise, don't come in here every time I'm live and just call me a liar and say I'm lying to you. It doesn't make you look good. All right, so Joseph, I don't care that Jesus said that this is about him. You cannot demonstrate from the actual text that this is a messianic text, much less that it's prophetic.
Well, you can't demonstrate that that's about David either, because David never built the temple. And then
It didn't say.
Two,
It's not a prediction about David building the temple.
So what is it about? That's the thing.
It's about
If I ask
King
you what
David.
it's about, you don't give him an answer.
It's about King David conquering his enemies. It says, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And then if you bother to read the historical books, it says that Yahweh did make David's enemies under his footstool. And it says, the Lord sends out from Zion a mighty scepter, rule in the midst of your foes. That's the promise that was made to David. Your people will offer themselves willingly on the day that you lead your forces on the holy mountains. That's something that David did. Did Jesus ever lead an army?
No.
Okay,
And
so
then,
clearly the
like I
language
said-
and the context of the actual text is indicating that it's about David. Again, it's the context and the grammar that will tell you what it means. You can't just say it means something because I want it to mean something. Then it says, from the womb of the morning, like dew, your youth will come to you. You're going to be invigorated. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. If you want to explain that, we can go into that. It says, the Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath, which is, again, still military language. This is promises being made to King David. So,
So the
where
day
is
of
this?
his wrath hasn't come.
Oh no, the day of
We
wrath.
know that.
The day of wrath against the enemies of God is always oncoming. When he unloaded against the Amalekites, that was a day of wrath. That was a day of revenge. When he unloaded against the Midianites, that was a day of wrath and revenge. And he does so even against his own people. He calls, when he strikes down his own people, he calls it a day of wrath. And in fact, he calls it a cup of wrath in which he made them drink.
Yeah, but this is a days, not saying days. And David is not a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek.
I knew you would get hung up on that. Okay, so do you know who Melchizedek is?
Yep, I know him.
Fantastic.
He is,
do you know what the ancient Israelites believed about Melchizedek?
no, I don't think I have studied that.
Fantastic. So the Israelites believed, and this is very clear in the book of Hebrews, if you go to chapter 7 of the book of Hebrews, that Melchizedek is an eternal or at least semi-eternal entity, because it says in the book of Hebrews that he didn't have any lineage. He basically just appeared. And if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's one called the Melchizedek Scroll. And he's basically like this semi-divine figure that manifests himself on earth at different time periods. So, for example, in the book of Genesis chapter 14, when Melchizedek shows up, that was a manifestation of Melchizedek, the spiritual divine entity. And then when King David is on the earth, that is a manifestation of the Melchizedek divinity. When Jesus comes, he is a manifestation of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek, according to the Bible and according to extra biblical literature, is like this semi-divine figure that manifests himself on the earth at particular times. So when it says that you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, he's just saying that King David is a manifestation of this divine priest king that we call Melchizedek.
Yeah, I agree with you that he's a manifestation of Jesus Christ. The same when God came to see Abraham. That's what I believe, and I don't really believe that he's a divine creature. But
have you read the Dead Sea Scrolls?
He's a manifestation. No, I don't. I don't consider anything that's out of the Bible as authoritative. But
you have to read the Dead Sea Scrolls to know what the New Testament authors are doing in the book of Hebrews when they talk about Melchizedek. So this is the part that people don't understand, is the Bible wasn't written in a vacuum. These people had beliefs, and their beliefs were formed in culture, in texts, and in writings. So in the book of Hebrews, it says, "This Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham as he was returning from defeating the kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham apportioned 1/10 of everything. His name in the first place means king of righteousness. Next, he is also the king of Salem. That is king of peace." Although this does bring up a good point, because in the Psalm 110, it doesn't actually have to read Melchizedek. If you just look at the Hebrew wording, it literally just means king of righteousness or righteous king. So if you talk to like a Hebrew Jewish rabbi, their typical interpretation of this is that the reference to Melchizedek in Psalm 110 is not actually about the mythological figure that we're talking about. Thank you, Denise.
Denise.
Denise, thank you for the subbies. So that's a problematic translation to begin with. Whoever translated the NRSV is being interpretive, and they're suggesting that King David is alluding to this mythological figure. But you don't have to carry that interpretation. I just leave it in because I can actually tell you about this mythological figure by reading, because the New Testament mentions. So it says, without father, without mother. So did Melchizedek have a father or mother?
No, he didn't.
Okay, so that's why I say he's a semi-divine being. Now, where would the author of Hebrews get this idea that Melchizedek didn't have a father or a mother?
He gets it in Genesis.
No. Genesis doesn't say Genesis doesn't say that Melchizedek was without father or mother. So where you get this from is in the book of Enoch, and also from the Melchizedek scroll. And in the book of Enoch, it explains that Melchizedek had a divine birth, much like Jesus. A spiritual, or the Spirit of God, placed Melchizedek in the stomach of his mother. And in fact, it alarmed her husband, because her husband was a priest, and the priest was away on duties, so he wasn't having intercourse. While you're on duties, doing your rites at the temple, you're not allowed to engage in intercourse because you would become unclean. So he hadn't slept with his wife for the duration of his services, and she became pregnant. And in fact, he was so alarmed that he thought it was one of the fallen angels, one of the watchers. He's like, "Oh my God, one of the watchers got my wife pregnant." But it wasn't. And it says that Melchizedek had this miraculous birth, just like Jesus. God placed Melchizedek in the womb of this woman. She was one of the cousins of Noah. And then Melchizedek then was born for the first time during the days of Noah. His first birth was during the days of Noah. His second birth actually is in Genesis 14. And that he actually came out of the womb. The mother died in labor, and then Melchizedek birthed himself. And he came out of the womb, and he was already talking. So that's the narrative of Melchizedek, who didn't have an earthly mother or an earthly father, which is what the book of Hebrews is leading to. Because as it turns out, the stuff in the New Testament came from somewhere, and I know where it came from because I've read the scrolls.
Okay. I wouldn't know where he got it from, but since most of the stuff that he's talking about in this chapter are not really mainline, I'll also say that
it's in the book of Hebrews.
By the Spirit.
Is the book of Hebrews mainline?
Yeah, I'm talking. No, I'm talking about the way Hebrews 1 was written. Like most of the stuff that are there are not how people understood the verses in the first place. So
Hebrews 7.
That's what I'm saying. That we were reading Hebrews 7 right now.
Hebrews chapter 7 says that Melchizedek didn't have a mother or a father, which coincides with the narrative written about him from the book of Enoch. Are you aware that the book of Enoch is also quoted in 2 Peter and also in the book of Jude?
Yeah, I know that.
Okay, so they believed things that were in the book of Enoch, which is why it says elsewhere that the angels are chained in, darkness, in, hell waiting for judgment. That's all from the book of Enoch. So when we get to the book of Hebrews and it mentions this mythology around this person called Melchizedek, it's talking about the book of Enoch. Now, as to Psalm 110, we don't know how early this tradition developed about Melchizedek. We don't know if at the time this psalm was written, they had this mythology, or if the author of this psalm is just saying that he is a priest king similar to Melchizedek, because Melchizedek was a priest and a king, and David likened himself to being a priest and a king.
Yep, and Melchizedek didn't have a beginning or an end, right?
Well, according to the book of Hebrews, but I would suggest that is a fanciful reading of the book of Genesis that developed in the intertestamental period, and I don't think that the author of Genesis intended people to believe that Melchizedek literally was otherworldly and he didn't have parents. I think that is a fantasy. But that being said, I want to stay on point because you brought up Psalm 110. And so far, we've read Psalm 110, and literally everything in here is easily applied to King David, and none of it's prophetic. Not a single word of this is prophetic other than the promise that was made to David, where it says, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool, which seems to have come true in 1 Kings chapter 5.
So what are you saying about in when Jesus actually says it? Because that's what I believe.
I know what you believe, but
Jesus actually says it?
You would have to give me a good reason to believe that Jesus' contorting of the scripture should be the correct reading of it. So this is where we keep going to. You think that Jesus fulfilled prophecies because the New Testament said he fulfilled the prophecies. But when we go back and we read them, it's clear that half of them aren't even prophecies. This is not a prophecy. This is a psalm. We have half of the Old Testament are literal prophets, like half of it. We should be able to open up any messianic prophecy and point to it and say, oh my God, Jesus did that. The prophet said it was going to happen, and then Jesus did it. But that's not what we find. We find a host of prophecies, and then when we actually read them, you're like, no, Jesus will do it. Oh, he did part of it. But that's not how prophecies work. Let me give you a strong prophecy about the Messiah. This is Jeremiah chapter 33, talking about the Messianic age, the new covenant age. It says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, in this place, we want 14. The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise that I made to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. So God is alluding, I've made promises, and I'm going to keep those promises true. In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he will execute justice and righteousness in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is the name by which it will be called, the Lord is our righteousness. For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to make grain offerings, and to make sacrifices for all time. This is the Messianic age, and Bitch Lizard, thank you so much for the boxing glove, W Bitch Lizard. This is a strong Messianic prophecy about one coming from the line of David and what he is going to do. This is not a guess.
So who did that?
Nobody did it because Jesus isn't the Messiah. There's no Messiah coming. There's no such thing as prophets. God isn't real. The prophecies in the Old Testament are wishful thinking.
Again, you're giving me your thinking, your wishful thinking.
Okay,
but
did God give this prophecy?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did.
Okay, and what does he say is going to happen in this prophecy?
So, on the let me see, I will cause a I'll cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. And then in those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is the name by which it will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. So when Jesus came, he did away with the sacrifices, right?
Well, that's the problem.
Then,
did you read the rest of it? This is why I quoted this passage, because it says, David will never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priest shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to make grain offerings, and to make sacrifices for all time. This is quite literally the sacrificial law being enacted. Have you read Ezekiel during the Messianic age, where he says that the actual prince of Israel is going to offer sacrifices in the physical temple with the physical people of Israel?
But sacrifices happen every year, and this is for all time.
Yeah, it's listen, what is a burnt offering?
Burnt offering is when they'll come with an ox or a lamb.
Yeah, and what's a grain offering?
It's when they'll also come with grain, and I think they'll burn it, right?
Yeah. Are these actual offerings according to the laws of Moses?
Yep, those are actual offerings.
Right. Are these spiritual offerings, or are they real offerings?
For this, I think they're metaphorical for what Jesus would actually do.
Oh, so Jesus it didn't literally fulfill this prophecy; he spiritually fulfilled it.
Yes.
And how did he?
That's why he died.
How did he? Okay, so then Simon Bar Kokhba spiritually fulfilled it, because Simon Bar Kokhba was an actual prince leader in Israel. He was a Messiah that was accepted by the Jewish people, and he died. So how do you know? So how do again? I don't care what the Bible says. You have to demonstrate first that Jesus is the Messiah before I care what the New Testament says about him. So Simon Bar Kokhba was an accepted Messiah by the Jewish people. He actually ruled in Israel. He actually had the scepter for a period of 4 years, and then he was executed by the Roman government. How is he not the spiritual fulfillment of this?
Because it says that David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne, right?
Oh, did Jesus sit on the throne?
Well, he's on the throne today in heaven.
No, that's Simon Bar Kokhba. Joseph, how do you know? No, Jesus is dead.
No, he's alive.
Well, where is he?
Well, why do you think?
Show him to me. Show him to me, Joseph.
He don't believe in you. He would call you a dog.
Okay, if
Muhammad's alive, Joseph Smith is alive, Gandhi's alive. Just claiming that dead people are alive doesn't make them alive.
That's not.
If you're going to claim that a dead person
Nero's
is
alive.
Praise Nero, hail Nero,
Nero Caesar.
Yeah, if you're going to claim, that a dead person is alive, you have to back that thing up with evidence.
So, having the books written after Jesus and Saul seeing Jesus after he died. How did he see him then?
They didn't. In fact, did you know that Nero resurrected and 20,000 Parthians went to war on his behalf? Are you saying that all 20,000 of those Parthian army warriors were martyrs for a lie?
Yes. They were.
Good. Then your martyrs died for a lie too. So this is already a bad argument.
We don't see Nero's story being told everywhere.
Yeah, we do. I just told it to you right now.
Clearly a myth.
Yes, we do. We actually have a book about it.
Yes, I'm sorry that you don't read, but I actually read, which is why I know about it. In fact, if you bother to read the Jewish writings, they wrote about it too. And if you bothered to read the book of Revelation, you would find that the author of Revelation even wrote about it. So I'm inclined to believe that you just haven't actually read anything, which is why you don't know about it. But back to silly claims about Jeremiah. It says that Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. Are those like actual people groups, or are those spiritual?
This is spiritual for now.
Okay, so it says here, the days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise that I made to the house of Israel and to Judah. Can you show me in the Old Testament where God promised to rescue Judah and Israel spiritually?
Well, when it's talking about the Messiah, as he said, my kingdom is not of this world.
Well, again, I don't care what Jesus said until you can demonstrate that he fulfilled a single prophecy. All you're telling me is that Jesus doesn't read the Old Testament, because the Old Testament quite literally says that Judah, an actual people group, is going to be rescued, and Jerusalem, an actual city, is going to live in safety. Have you read any of Jeremiah? I bet the only verse in Jeremiah you've ever read is Jeremiah 31:31.
I've read everything in Jeremiah.
Because you haven't read this, because it says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in this place that is waste, without humans or animals, in all of its towns, there shall again be pasture for shepherds resting their flocks. In the towns of the hill country, of the Shephelah, of the Negev, in the land of Benjamin, the places around Jerusalem, in the towns of Judah, flocks shall again pasture under the hands of the one," I'm sorry, the screen blacked out. "Under the hands of the one who counts them, says the Lord." Is this a spiritual prophecy, or is this talking about an actual restoration of the people to their land?
No, this has happened now. This is actually...
Oh,
this is actually
so
physical.
it happened 2,000 years after Jesus died, so Jesus didn't fulfill it then.
When you say a righteous branch, are you talking about someone who's actually leaving, or is it an actual branch that's coming up, or it's metaphorical?
You know who the branch of David is. It's someone that comes from his lineage, a branch of his lineage, an actual king. The Messiah is supposed to come from the line of David, which is why in the book of Ezekiel, when Ezekiel makes his prophecy, let me grab it. Did I type in the wrong passage again? Oh, S-E-X. We want easy. There we go. Ezekiel 37. There we go. Ezekiel says, "Mortal, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is lost. We are cut off completely. Therefore prophesy and say to them, Thus saith the Lord God, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people, and I will bring you back to the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people." This is the promise that God made, which is being referred to elsewhere. God is going to return his people to the land. It's not a spiritual return.
Mm-hmm. So did this actually happen?
Not really. After the Babylonian exile, it kind of partially happened. Like people sort of trickled back. Which is why when Jesus came, it says in Luke chapter 1 that Jesus is going to be the one that returns.
It's this time you have to go sleepy. Okay, I love you.
We love you too.
Sorry, Hanji, I had to mute you. I don't think she knew that she was mic'd. Okay, so anyways, let's go to Ezekiel. We're already in the right chapter. We're going to go to verse 24. This is the same prophecy still yet. And then he said, Thus saith the Lord God, I will take the people of Israel from the nations among which they have gone, and I will gather them from every quarter and bring them to their own land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king over them all. Never again shall they be two nations. So this is a restoration of both kingdoms. Never again shall they be two nations. Never again shall they be divided into two kingdoms. They shall never again defile themselves with their idols and their detestable things, or with any of their transgressions. Then he goes on, he says, My servant David shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. They shall follow my ordinances and be careful to observe my statutes. And they will live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, in which your ancestors lived. That is not a spiritual promise. That is a promise of God putting a king over his people in the actual physical land.
Yeah, like I said, the Bible speaks in parallels.
Okay.
It speaks about the physical, at the same time speaking about the spiritual.
So the words don't mean what words mean. I always forget, guys, words don't mean what they actually mean. You have to read a word And then you have to ask yourself, what does this mean other than what it actually says? When it says that they will live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, in which your ancestors lived, why would you look at that and say, oh, he's not actually talking about the land that he gave to Jacob. He's talking about something spiritual. Do you see what kind of mental gymnastics you have to do to make your theology work?
All right, let me explain. So when Paul
I already know. You're just saying that words don't mean words.
When Paul was given a vision of food that he had to kill and eat, and
Peter, that was Peter.
He mentioned that. Peter, sorry. When he was given a vision of food that he was meant to kill and eat, and he said, "This is unclean. I will not eat this." But it says that the Lord has. Do not say that it's unclean what the Lord has made clean.
Yes, I'm aware.
And we know that. Yeah, and we know that this didn't just refer to animals. It also referred to people that were considered unclean,
yes,
the Gentiles.
It refers to the Gentiles, I know.
Unclean.
Yep.
Yes, and I'm using the same methodology here. That when it speaks about this, it speaks about both worlds, like in the spiritual.
But Joseph,
and it also comes
I don't know how many times I can say this. You're still saying that my interpretation is true because the New Testament says it's true. And you haven't demonstrated a single reason why I should care what is in the New Testament. I do not care what your New Testament says about how to interpret the Old Testament for the same reason that you don't care what the Book of Mormon tells you about the New Testament. Until you can give me a reason to believe that the New Testament is true, I'm absolutely not going to take its interpretation of the Old Testament.
What would make it true?
The prophecies would have to come true without twisting yourself into literal pretzels trying to say that words don't mean what words mean.
Okay. So when God said that let me think of this verse. It should be in Haggai 2. Let me try and find it.
You find it. I'm going to read you another verse from Ezekiel 44 that I know you haven't read.
All right.
Did Peter say that the Gentiles don't need to get circumcised?
Peter?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Paul. I meant Paul.
Yes, Paul did say that.
Okay. Now, have you read what Ezekiel says about the Messianic age?
I don't know what you're really referring to right now, but
the whole second half of Ezekiel is about the Messianic age, when the Prince Nagid comes and reigns over Israel, and they're restored to their land once again. And they're in the temple, offering actual sacrifices in the temple once again. It says, say to the rebellious house, to the house of Israel, thus saith the Lord God, O house of Israel, let there be an end to all your abominations in admitting foreigners, uncircumcised in heart and flesh, to be in my sanctuary, profaning my temple. When you offer to me my food, the fat of the blood, you have broken my covenant with all your abominations, and you have not kept charge of my sacred offerings. But you have appointed foreigners to act for you in keeping charge in my sanctuary. Thus saith the Lord, no foreigner uncircumcised in heart and flesh of all the foreigners who are among the people of Israel shall enter into my sanctuary. God is pretty adamant in the book of Ezekiel that the foreigners need to be circumcised. And your flipping is incredibly loud right now.
Oh, sorry.
Justin,
Okay,
the little one says hi. I'm sorry about that. She knocked out my AirPod when I was tucking her in.
Hi, sweetie. I hope you sleep well.
She's like, I want to say hi to Justin. Let me say. I'm like, no, baby, you can't be on the line. But I'll tell her.
In fact, the same chapter in Ezekiel talks about how there's literally going to be offerings and sacrifices that are done again. Very same section in chapter 43. It quite literally talks about how the temple is going to be restored. As for you, O mortal, describe the temple to the house of Israel and let them measure the pattern and let Let them be ashamed of their iniquities. When they are ashamed of all they have done, make known to them the plan of the temple, its arrangements, its exits, its entrances, its whole form, all of its ordinances, its entire plan. And then it goes on about how it's going to be designed later on. And it says about the measurements, it gives cubits for the measurements of the altar. And then when we get down to 18, what are we doing in the temple? It says, these are the ordinances for the altar on the day when it is erected, for offering burnt offerings upon it and for dashing blood against it. You shall give to the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok, who draw near to me to minister to me, says the Lord God, a bull of the herd of purification offering, and you shall take some of its blood and put it on the four corners. And he goes on. He gives about 12 different sacrifices and offerings during the restored temple age that they're supposed to be engaging in.
Okay.
And this is all while the actual Messiah Prince has been delivered. He's actually on the earth leading the Israelites.
And can I see, this is Ezekiel, right?
Yeah, so the latter half of Ezekiel, it's a little bit less than half, a little bit closer to a third, talks about the Messianic age, when the land is going to be restored, the people are all going to return, and there's going to be one king over them all. Remember, so we're in chapter 43 right now, but we just read in chapter 37 where it says they're all going to return from the land. They're going to be one nation again. They're never going to be divided. And my servant David is going to be king over them. They'll have one shepherd. And then if you keep reading after this chapter, he describes everything that's going to happen during this time period.
Ooh, thank you, Bitch Lizard, Tiny Danny Rar. I love what Backslider said in comments, because you know what? I never thought about that. And that makes so much. If God made his creation so perfect, why is he ordering them to chop off a piece if they were already created with it, born with it? Why even...
Here's the other thing about circumcision that nobody mentions. There's this idea that, well, God commanded Abraham and all of his descendants to take just a tip, but that was already practiced in ancient Egypt well before the Hebrews were doing it. They literally were probably just doing it because when they went to the Semitic Wallace, thank you so much for the smart bean. When the Semitic people went into Egypt, they had to abide by Egyptian practices. So when they came out and reformed their own nation group, they still retained some of the cleanliness practices of the Egyptians. And obviously, they had to figure out a reason for it. Well, why are we cutting the tips of our penises off? Mm-hmm. This is kind of a silly thing. Well, it's because God told us to. More fiction. All right, so,
even though they got it from the ancient Egyptians.
I know, right?
That's funny.
So there's so much there. But so, Joseph, here's my point. Mm-hmm. If you did a thorough reading of the Old Testament prophets, you will not find anything in there that points towards a dying Messiah. Every time it mentions the king coming from the line of David, it says that he's going to reinstitute the laws. He's going to reinstitute the Levitical priests. All the people are going to be restored to their land again. All of these things are going to happen, which is why in the book of Revelation, whoever wrote Revelation knew that they had all these failed prophecies, and they had to say, no, he's going to do it when he comes back. And that is adorable that you think he's going to do it thousands of years after he was executed. But he didn't do it. And so until he actually does it, he's just not the Messiah.
Okay, so when this verse says, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant, how would it be an everlasting covenant when the first covenant was broken? What's different about this one?
Easy. Well, it doesn't say new covenant. The word you find there in Hebrew just means like a renewed covenant. It's a tentative reading. I understand what they're saying. It's going to be a new covenant. It's going to be slightly modified. So new is not a bad translation, but there's a little bit of nuance to it. Anyways, what passage were you in? Are you in Ezekiel 37? There we go. 37,
yeah, 26 there.
I will make a covenant of peace with them. This is something that was talked about by all of the Old Testament prophets. Jeremiah talked about it in chapter 31. Isaiah talked about it. And I really want you to read what Isaiah said about it. So the renewed covenant is something that most of the prophets talked about. And it's going to be a time of peace when God is no longer going to be mad at his people. And I want you to, Isaiah says the awesomest thing about it. Let me grab it real quick. I think it's about 54, chapter 54 in Isaiah. There we go. Yep, chapter 54. Sometimes my memory works. All right, we're going to go down to verse 9. So all of the prophets prophesied that there's going to be a period of restoration after all the punishment that Israel took on. God's going to restore his people. He's going to put a king on the throne. He's never going to be mad at them again. Isaiah is the clearest example of this. It says, "This is like the days of Noah to me, just as I swore." Thank you so much for the money gun, Thomas. This is like the days of Noah to me, just as I swore that the waters of Noah would never again go over the earth. So I have sworn that I will not be angry with you. I will not rebuke you. For the mountains may depart and the hills may be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord who has compassion on you. So God says, hey, listen, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to rebuke you again, which, again, as an atheist, I can just look at this and say, oh, well, that's bullshit, because not long after this, the Greeks came through and completely decimated the Jewish people. And then later on, the Romans did it. And if you follow your New Testament theology, the New Testament even says that God is rebuking Israel through their sufferings at the hands of the Romans.
So, didn't the Jews reject this new covenant?
No, they rejected Jesus because Jesus didn't fulfill anything. They didn't reject the new covenant. They rejected Jesus because Jesus was a blasphemer.
So, if they rejected Jesus, which means they never accepted the new covenant, so how would this
Thank you,
come
Thomas.
true?
The new covenant hasn't come. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The new covenant will never come, because the God of this book does not exist. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen, Joseph.
This is you saying it, and I'm also saying that Jesus came with the new covenant and they rejected it. That's why they were destroyed again.
Well, this says quite literally that won't happen. It says, just as I swore to the waters of Noah, never again would go over the earth, so I have sworn that I will not be angry with you. But he was. So you can't say that this happened, that Jesus or that God changed his mind, because Numbers says that God is not like a man that he would lie, nor like a son of man that he would change his mind.
Did they accept the covenant, though? That's what I'm asking.
It doesn't matter. God says...
Because they broke the first one.
It doesn't matter. God says that he won't be angry with them. He doesn't say that I won't be angry with you unless you don't accept me. God was not angry with Israel for rejecting Jesus. God wasn't angry with anybody because God isn't real. So
okay,
you've been on here, I don't know, probably 2 hours now, and you failed to show even one prophecy that Jesus fulfilled. And this is a clear demonstration.
Okay, just one more.
This is a clear demonstration why I don't believe that Jesus is a Messiah, and I don't care what the New Testament says about the Old Testament, because who's ever reading the New Testament clearly didn't understand it. They're just making stuff up.
So when the Bible says that Israel will reject this Messiah,
it doesn't say that.
It doesn't. What does it say then?
Show me in the Old Testament where it says that the Messiah will be rejected.
I think this verse is there in the Old Testament, that the stone that the builders rejected has now become.
That's not a prophecy. Why do you think? So I don't know how many times we have to say this. Just because something is said in the Old Testament that somebody in the New Testament called a prophecy doesn't make it a prophecy. We've already gone over the actual genre of prophecy and what makes a prophecy a prophecy. It's not a prophecy just because somebody in your favorite book said so.
Can you tell me what it means then?
Yeah, we can look it up. I'll show you. Let's see. Oh, that was in the Psalm 118, if I remember correctly. I'll get it on the screen. All right, so it's a song of victory. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever. Let Israel say, his steadfast love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his steadfast love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his steadfast love endures forever. Out of my distress I called on the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me in a broad place. With the Lord on my side, I do not fear. What can mortals do to me? The Lord is on my side to help me. I shall look in triumph on those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in mortals. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. All nations surround me. In the name of the Lord, I cut them off. They surrounded me on every side. In the name of the Lord, I cut them off. They surrounded me like bees. They blazed like a fire of thorns. In the name of the Lord, I cut them off. I was pushed hard so that I was falling, but the Lord helped me. The Lord is my strength and my might, and he has become my salvation. There are glad songs of victory in the tents of the righteous. The righteous hand of the Lord does valiantly. The right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. I shall not unalive, but I shall live, and recount the deeds of the Lord. The Lord has punished me severely, but he did not give me over to death. Open to me the gates of righteousness, that I might enter through them and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous shall enter through it. I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Save us, we beseech you, O Lord. Lord, we beseech you, give us success. And we can keep reading, but we read the part. So this is a song, as he already said, about even though he was punished severely, the Lord rescued him from his trials. The stone... The author is likening himself to a stone that was rejected. The stone that was rejected has now become the chief cornerstone. And how has this happened? Because the Lord has rescued him. The whole psalm is a rescue from his trials.
Well, I'd say this is talking about Jesus, because Jesus wasn't given over to death. Jesus wasn't given over to death.
Do you know that people don't write psalms while they're dead?
Yeah.
Okay, so the author of the psalm was
eventually died.
So the author of the psalm was alive when he wrote this, wasn't he?
But he's dead now, right?
Did he say, I will never die?
He said, you never gave me over to death.
Yes, you did not give me over to death, meaning he's still alive. He's not saying, I won't die.
He's still alive.
He's not saying
but
that.
Right now, he's dead.
Yeah, he is dead now, yes. But doesn't say...
He wants to fucking play.
I know, that's all he has is words don't mean words. So it doesn't say that he's never going to die. It says, the Lord has punished me severely, but he did not give me over to death. Thank you, bitch lizard. So if I went to war in, I don't know, in the Middle East, and I say, listen, the Lord punished me severely in war, but he didn't give me over to death. All I'm saying is that I survived. I'm not saying...
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm never going to die. Thank you, Bertram.
I mean, if you're being honest here, I see a parallel.
I am.
And I've been seeing parallels all over the verses that you've been talking about, and this one is no exception. But I know it will just make you wrong if you just accepted the parallel, and Jesus actually mentioned this first. So
how do you know that I'm not the stone that the builders rejected? Because every parallel that you're saying is a parallel. You're just saying it because the New Testament said it. But I could say the same thing. I'm the Messiah. You rejected me as the Messiah. So therefore, I'm the stone that the builders rejected. You're just validating that I'm the Messiah. When are you going to stop rejecting the new covenant, stop rejecting your Messiah, bow down and worship me, and stop rejecting the stone?
Okay, I haven't rejected you. Just prove that you're the Messiah.
I don't need to, because you can't prove that Jesus is the Messiah. All I have to do is claim that I'm the Messiah, and then show you prophecies out of context and say that it's about me. So Joseph, this is a clear thing. Every time we go to an actual prophecy about the Messiah, it's clearly not about Jesus. And then we go to passages that are not prophecies, and you're like, oh my gosh, that That sounds like something the New Testament said. It must be a prophecy. And this is why you're the dishonest one here. You're the one that can't come to grips with reality and just say, no, the prophets talked about something completely different. And that's why I'm running away from what the prophets say, and I'm running towards texts that aren't even prophecies in order to prop up my failed Messiah.
Guys, don't waste your energy on Evie. She's just a pick-me. How does it feel to not be picked, Evie? Cry about it.
Yeah, all right.
You didn't even go to seminary. He did. Full stop.
So when Jesus said the prophets talked about me, was he lying?
Yeah. He's a liar. He's a liar, and you're easily fooled by lies.
No, I doubt that.
Okay, well, why would... I don't think he did. Are you aware that Emperor Vespasian healed people?
Who's that?
Emperor Vespasian?
I mean,
you didn't even know who Emperor Vespasian is?
These guys don't read. They never read.
Hey, sweetie, we have plenty of books. Maybe you should pick up your boobs and go somewhere else. Getting pick-me energy vibes in here is not going to work out well for you. Try again. Yeah. Continue, gentlemen.
Thanks. This is the very last thing we're going to read tonight because I've stayed 45 minutes past my bedtime just to cook you.
Yeah.
You really did.
Thank you.
So
thank you for staying 45 minutes.
Emperor Vespasian. This is a testimony. It's recorded in Tacitus and Suetonius, both credible Roman historians. Says a poor man who was blind and another who was lame came both together before him when he was seated on the tribunal, imploring to heal them, and saying that they were admonished in a dream by the god Serapis to seek his aid, who assured them that he would restore sight to the one by anointing his eyes with spittle, and give strength to the leg of the other, if he vouchsafed but to touch it with his heel. At first he could scarcely believe that the thing would anyhow succeed, and therefore hesitated to venture on making the experiment. At length, however, by the advice of his friends, he made the attempt publicly in the presence of the assembled multitudes, and it was crowned a success in both cases. So do you believe that Emperor Vespasian healed a blind man and also a man who was lame?
I don't believe this.
Oh, okay. So I don't believe your fairy tales for the same reason you don't believe these fairy tales.
I mean, I can look it up.
Glad you can play along.
Look it,
definitely look it up. His name is Serapis Christus.
Yeah. All right. So
Serapis
Joseph.
Christus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check him out. Joseph, I had a good time talking to you. The conversation, if I remember correctly, the conversation went literally bar for bar, exactly like our last conversation. So I'm not sure why you didn't learn your lesson, but I appreciate you playing along. I gave you a hard time. You took it very well. And so listen,
I gave you a hard time, and
no, you were very good to me. You were way better to me than I deserve. I promise you were.
Well, it's all for the glory of God, really. So I really hope that,
praise Marduk
from each other. I'm learning a lot from you, by the way.
All right, Joseph, I had a great time talking to you.
No, it's good.
I hope you have a great night. I'm going to get to bed, but thanks for being here. Hope you have a good night.
Back to bed. Okay.